In 2020, the North Dakota Geological Survey commissioned Natee Himmapaan for new artwork featuring Dakota the Dinomummy. Some of the most iconic Edmontosaurus artwork was done by Charles Knight in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Other classic pieces were done in the 1950s by Zdenek Burian. Sadly, all of this artwork displays Edmontosaurus as having a more kangaroo-style pose. So how did we determine what information to send off to Natee to draw? For the hind feet, we know that Dakota had deflated toe pads, which were probably filled with some kind of a weight-distributing cushion. These wide toes were not webbed, but would have acted more like a caribou's toes or those of a camel in order to distribute the weight across shifting ground, like snow or sand. All along the back of Dakota are decorative scales similar to those seen on the back of an iguana. These scales are not supported by bone, but are rather hardened structures like your fingernail or hair. Along the belly portion of Dakota's tail, with all of the dehydration that has occurred in the carcass, there's an interesting quilted pattern that has occurred most likely due to collagen fibers. So what did this look like during life? Would it have been like an elephant skin covered in wrinkles for flexibility? Or would those wrinkles have been completely hidden in a well-hydrated Edmontosaurus? We know closer to the body, the tail would have been flexible as it swayed back and forth, but the end of the tail was a much more rigid structure supported by tendons. The front feet of Dakota are probably the most iconic feature of Dakota. This mitten-like hand is composed of 4 fingers. It has no thumb. The pointer finger has a sharp spade-like nail attached to it. The middle finger ended in a large nail that overlapped the ring finger. And what we now know as a prehensile pinky had no nail at all. The back of the arm had large and small scales depending on where you looked. In areas where it needed to bend, the scales were very small. On areas such as the forearm, the scales were very large, almost the size of a dime. Towards the elbow, a flexible patchwork of large scales surrounded by small scales is repeated just like it does on the calf. The scale structure is similar to what is seen on the legs of an ostrich or an emu. However, it does not have the very large plate-like scales. In 2013, part of an Edmontosaurus skeleton was discovered that included parts of the head and parts of what looked to be a fleshy comb on the top of its head. It also displayed the repeating pattern of large scales surrounded by small scales that we show on Dakota's calf and elbow. Even though Dakota doesn't have a head or a neck, we can infer from these other fossils what Dakota may have looked like. Much like the scales on Dakota's back, the fleshy comb would not have been held up by more bone, but could have just been a soft structure. Does this mean Dakota could have had a waddle? Maybe. Julius Chotonier did some great artwork for this new fleshy comb, but I didn't have permission to post it, so I would just go check it out on your own. It will be interesting to see how Edmontosaurus continues to change over the next number of decades.